this is the website that I went to get all of this information. And so the way I'm going to organize this information is to make it as user readable as possible when you're actually in battle, and also just when you're outside of battle and just trying to remember all of the move sets. I do well, first I'll show you just all of the information. Just this is sort of just what it looks like. It's just the mon. Just scrolling back up to the top now. It's just the mon, and then so it starts in alphabetical order with the first mon, which is Abomasnow, and then it has for each mon just like the same information: level 82, abilities like snow warning, and then what items it has, and then what moves it has. And then these are the percentages of each move and each item. So the raw code will actually look just like this. Um, so this is in Courier New 10. I think I'm just going to leave it that way. I kind of like this font and font size. And so this is basically saying that it's always going to be level 82, although I think I have to research it, but I think like the levels of each mon are based on the win rate of each mon. So it's like whenever a player wins a game, then that goes into the mathematical equation that the developers, the game developers, use to calculate what the level should be. So if this mon wins more games, or if the player who has this mon on their team wins more games, then it's going to be a higher level than a lower level. So it looks like Absol and Abomasnow are about the same level, for example, and then you would have like a Selgor. Yeah, these are all kind of mid mons in Aegis/Chew. They aren't really game-winning mons. Same with Aerodactyl and Aggron. And then, wait, an Alakazam is this low of a level? Is that correct? So there are two different sets for Alakazam, for example. There's the Life Orb and Focus Sash sets, or two different items, I should say. But it looks like the level is going to be the same for both of those sets. So whenever you see Alakazam, no matter the set, it's going to be 78. So that's not a method you can use to differentiate when you see an opponent's Alakazam to determine if it's Sash or Life Orb. You can't just look at the level to determine that. So this is what I'm actually doing with the code. So obviously, if you see Abomasnow, I mean, the level doesn't really matter. You don't really have to pay attention to that. I think there used to be a Zoroark bug. I can see if that's still the case, in which case, yeah, then you have to worry about all the levels of all the mons and determining if it's Zoroark or not. Only if that bug is present. So then the abilities would be Snow Warning. That's the only ability that Abomasnow will have. See, the probability is 1, so that means it'll have it 100% of the time. So obviously I'm not going to write that down in this, like right here, down here, because then that's just taking up more space. So if I'm ever in battle, then it's just useless information. Obviously, the only way it wouldn't be Snow Warning is if I get confused maybe and I have like Rayquaza out, which has like Airlock or Cloud9, and then like one of those Cloud9 or Airlock mons, and then I just forget that that cancels out the Snow Warning. Or if it's Zoroark, which of course would not reveal the Snow Warning. The other way is if you have Stealth Rock up, and then yeah, but then you would see Zoroark versus Abomasnow then, because Abomasnow would take more from rocks than a Zoroark would. But anyway, that's just why I'm writing the information like this instead of including everything like down here, like the level and the ability, because they're unnecessary in many cases to include, and they just will slow your gameplay down. They'll make you run out of time on the timer faster. So then for the items, it says light clay. It gets that 72% of the time, and then it gets assault vest AV 75% of the time. So I did write those two possible sets right here. 72% chance it has the light clay, 27% chance it has assault vest, and then there's going to be a 1% chance that it just reads you win the game, I guess. That's where the remaining 1% went if you add up 72, 27. And then for the moves, we have a 100% chance to always have Blizzard on Abomasnow. So that's why I just write for the light clay set, you have a 100% chance of having Aurora Veil and Blizzard. So I just write those two up front without having the percentages listed, because I actually want to write this move first, the Aurora Veil, because that's the first thing you need to know to realize that it's the light clay set rather than the assault vest set. If they ever go for Aurora Veil, then you automatically know that it's exactly this set, and it'll never be this set where you know all four of its moves, and vice versa. So that's why I'm not putting Aurora Veil like last on here, because it's actually the first thing I want to look for when I'm scouting the opponent's team. And so then we have Woodhammer, which is 80. It has an 80. So basically, if it is the Assault Vest set, it'll always have these four moves: Blizzard, Woodhammer, Ice Shard, and Earthquake. So that's why I didn't even put any probability next to the moves, because that will always be the case, because here you can see the only possible moves are Blizzard, Woodhammer, Ice Shard, Earthquake, Aurora Veil. But if it's not the Light Clay set, then it will never have Aurora Veil. So then it's just going to always be Blizzard, Woodhammer, Ice Shard, Earthquake. And then for the other set, the Light Clay set, we have the Woodhammer, Shard, and Earthquake. So I'm not exactly sure, like, because they didn't include all of the possible information, like, in like this code that I got from the website. I don't think it exists anywhere, like the actual probabilities of or actually, maybe I'm thinking too hard about this. Maybe this is correct, because here it says Aurora Veil you get 72% of the time, and then that aligns with the ability, the item Light Clay, which you also get exactly 72% of the time once again. So that matches that identically. So I think for that set, you actually would just take these exact values. Yeah, I think you would just take these exact values in this case for this one mon. So that's just why I'm taking those, like Woodhammer is 80%, Ice Shard 73%, Earthquake 73%, and just listing those exact values right here. So yeah, Ice Shard is very slightly higher in probability than having Earthquake, but they're both basically 73%. And I basically just want to keep the information as short as possible. There isn't really any point in writing. Well, I mean, there is a point in writing like 80.93% chance for Woodhammer, but there's actually more of a downside to writing the long form like that, because when you're playing against an opponent, you're going to want to come back to this and just take a real quick glance at it, like in game, like when you're actually battling. So it's going to slow you down if you have to read and think about 80.93%. I would just write 80 or 81%, just so it's faster for your brain to process, so you don't run out of time on the timer. And then I am just putting the percent. I'm not leaving any space in between the 80% and the first word, like Woodhammer. And I think I'm just going to use that method for each one, because like if I'm separating them like this, then it's not on the same line, so then it just takes longer to read all that. Because in fact, I might even misread it, because I just see Earthquake here, then I might think, oh, it 100% has Earthquake on it. But no, if I just didn't leave a space there, then I wouldn't ever get confused, because the percentage is just right next to the actual move or whatever. That could go for also if I want to do that for abilities or whatever. So I think that's just the better way to write this. Right, and because I have so many mons to go through, I'm not actually gonna like round up or round down, because that might be inconsistent if I forget, because I'm not gonna be able to do this in like a few days or a few weeks even. This is gonna be a really long project to actually get all of these sets. So I'm not like thinking about, okay, 72.49% rounds, I could round that up, just round everything up to 73, like no matter what, like even if it's 72.01%. Or I'm not thinking that, do I do that, or do I just always round it down? Like if it's 72.5, I round up to 73, or if it's 72, if it's anything under that, then I just round down to 72. I'm not going to take all of that mental energy and waste all my time doing that. So I just am going to quickly glance at the first two digits and just write that because it doesn't really affect anything anyway. Like for my gameplay, like if it's 70, if it's just 1% difference, it's not going to affect my gameplay really at all. If this is like 73% or 72%, and then the other one is like 27 or 28%. Um, so it's going to be just like way faster and more convenient and make me actually just feel more motivated to get all of these sets done if I just do the slightly simpler method of doing it that way. And then the other thing that's weird about this code, I can just show you Control F age. So like this is what's also like weirdly inaccurate about like the code that's given is because you have the age slash which has the items like leftovers and life orb, but this code isn't exactly useful because here you can see this is the King's Shield set and it has like the shield, the shadow ball, the sub, the toxic, the sneak, the cannon, the combat, and obviously these are talking about different sets because there is one set that everyone in random battles knows about, which is the King Shield Shadow Ball Substitute Toxic set, and that'll always be, and it's leftovers as well, and it'll always be that exact set with no other possible moves. In fact, I'm pretty certain that's the most common Aegis-Slash set. Like if you ever see Aegis-Slash, Aegis-Slash, or Aegis-Slash Blade, well, you won't actually know that it's Aegis-Slash Blade until it goes for moves. But if you ever see Aegis-Slash, then you'll know that it's almost always sort of hinting at that by this really high percentage, like 97% there. It's almost always that exact set. Shield Ball Sub Toxic. So the code isn't taking that into account. Like it isn't telling you what I just told you that every player knows. Because this should say like there's a set that is 100% King Shield, 100% Shadow Ball, 100% Sub, 100% Toxic, but it actually has these other probabilities listed here. So that's what's going to, so that's like something that's just like incomplete or confusing. It's incomplete information basically that's given to you with the code here. Because what it's actually doing, what they're actually doing with this code is they're saying that there's Aegis Slash and then there's Aegis Slash Blade. So Aegis Slash Blade does not have King Shield anywhere on its moveset. So that's going to be your choice band and your life orb sets. Yeah, life orb. I didn't really highlight it, but yeah. And then the other set, which is just called Aegis Slash in the code, is the reason it's called Aegis Slash and not Aegis Slash Blade is because it has King Shield on the set. So there is a set that can roll King Shield and then attacks that aren't like Toxic, Sub, Shadow Ball. It can be like King Shield, Shadow Sneak, Flash Cannon, Close Combat. In fact, that is always what the set will be. Now that I'm thinking about it, it would be, if it's not King Shield, Shadow Ball, Sub, Toxic, then if it does reveal King Shield, then it would have to be Sneak, Flash Cannon, Close Combat, right? Or it could, or actually the slightly confusing part about that is it could also have Shadow Ball, but it won't be like I'm quite certain, I'm almost 100% certain, I've never seen a set in like tens of thousands of battles that was like King's Shield plus, specifically King's Shield plus so what I'm saying is if it's not that set, that's King Shield Ball Subtoxic, if it's the other King Shield set, then I don't think it'll ever have Sub or Toxic on it. Like I think it will be a combination of like Shadow Ball and or Sneak and or Cannon and or Combat. But without any possibility of Toxic or Sub. But yeah, so I'm just saying that their code is incomplete. But of course, if it's not the King Shield set, then it will be Aegis Slash Blade, and then you have to figure out if they're banned or orb, and then obviously if they're banned, they won't ever have Swords Dance. So then it can be Combat, Head, Sneak, Claw. In fact, you do know their exact set. If they're banded, it'll be that exact set. But if they're a life orb, then it can. That's when it can be. That's when you would actually just list these exact probabilities here. if it is life orb on the blade, so without King Shield, then it will be always having the close combat because that and Iron Head as well, because those are actually just the strongest moves. That's why it auto generates as like 100% probability for both of those, because that's like 120 damage with stab Iron Head and 120 damage with close combat. So that's why it'll always give you the highest probability of having those moves. And then it'll just be like 81% Swords Dance, 74 Sneak, 44 Shadow Claw if you're looking at that Life Orb set. So that is how you can basically look at all of these mons in here and determine how to do this. So I'm going to post this like my work basically. Like I'm going to do this for every single mon on here, but that may not be for a very long time. Who knows, maybe even a year. Like from now, if I'm just, only doing a few sets here and there every week, maybe. Of course, like, yeah, it's going to take like a super long time to do all this. And then we do have, maybe I'll just do like one or two more. So what I was doing before, which was not very good, was I was actually just writing every single mon and every like move set before, but I actually think it's just going to be faster and better organized if I just like copy paste this like whole thing like I just did today and just do it this way instead. Because you actually, in fact, this is missing something, which, oh boy, maybe I have to find like if I can just copy paste that right now. Maybe I'll do that after I make this video. Is that you actually can see like the stats. So when you're actually like the attack, HP, and speed and whatnot, and then so you actually want to have all of that data like when you're, especially when you're actually like analyzing the set like in your own time rather than when you're playing in game, because in game it also tells you if you hover over them on, if you have the tool like extension, it tells you their attack and speed and everything, and it also tells you all their moves and whatnot, but it won't tell you like this information, which is why you have to like do all this manually like I'm doing now. I mean, you could even like just, if you don't want to do all this work, you just will run out of time on the timer if you're trying to read like all of this stuff, right? Like snow warning, when like basically figuring out like everything that it took me like half an hour or whatever to figure out, like, or 10 minutes or whatever to figure out like right here that okay, it's going to be this set or this set, and then I know exactly what the probabilities are in this easy to read, fast to read format. Um, but yeah, just when you're thinking about how mons interact with other mons, and then just getting good, basically just improving your knowledge base in general, you're going to want to include like the attack and speed and stuff here, which unfortunately isn't included like right here at the moment. I'm going to have to do that next. That's the next step. But in the meantime, we can do maybe just one or two other mons. So we do have Absol, which stands for absolutely trash. I mean, Absol is a decent mon. I mean, I guess that you can even tell by the level. So it's absolutely decent is what I would say, because it's given a level 84. So we have the ability is always going to be justified, and then so that's basically something I wouldn't actually bother writing like in here when I do this mon, because it's always that ability, and then the items will be life orb 67% of the time, band 18% of the time, sash 13% of the time, unless if it's a lead. That's the other thing I'm doing. I might post that video before or after this one, like right after, right before, right around when I post this video, is I'm trying to find statistically the odds that a mon will be sash when it's lead. So far it seems like if the mon can have a sash on its set, then it will have a sash if it's lead something like 50% of the time. So those odds jump up from 13%. In fact, if it's not lead, it'll never be sash as well. So it's almost kind of useless having this like 13% here. I'm trying to think if that's ever going to be useful info. Or I think the way to look at it, and I am still doing the statistics on this just by getting a bunch of teams and looking at them a bunch of times to see how often the lead is or is not sash. But so far it seems like roughly if the lead can have sash, it will be sash about 50% of the time, which kind of makes sense that that's the number because that's just easy to code in. I mean, it's just a solid number, 50%, you know. But then again, they do code all these these other random values like that aren't like whole numbers, like 67%, 67.29%, 18.76%. It sort of makes me think that they're using some program to calculate how often they want to give mons these like items and these moves just based on like win rate percentages, which is also I know how they calculate the, or I'm quite certain I read that somewhere, which is how they calculate the level. So maybe they use a similar algorithm for calculating the odds that they get certain moves and items, you know, just so they can try to balance the game even better so that you and your opponent both have like a similar level of monsters. So you don't have like 6 100 level legendaries and your opponent has like 6 like level 70 really bad monsters that aren't legendaries, you know. So they might be trying to do that same thing. Just I was also thinking with like BST. Do they don't include like BST here, but I wonder if in their calculation they just include like they try to make both teams like you and your opponent like the same BST, like roughly. That's one thing I should also test for that I haven't yet. So anyway, for this we have the life orb, set, band, and sash. So yeah, that makes sense. The life orb is going to be a lot more likely than the band. You know, I almost wonder if they code it in that way because I feel like Life Orb is kind of the better item than Band, like in most cases for most mons, because you can actually switch up your moves and Life Orb is actually really good for when you Dynamax because it still activates, whereas like Band and Scarf and Specs don't actually have any effect when you're in the Dynamax form. In fact, they often like lock you into a move that makes it easy for your opponent to play around your moves and like maybe even bait you into Dynamaxing your banded Mon, for example. So I think that's why maybe they wanted to give a lower percentage to band. And in fact, if the algorithm is what's doing that, then that would make sense too, based on what I'm saying, because I think you would just lose more games in general if like you have a bunch of banded or like specs mons instead of if they were just like life orb or you know better items or quote better items. My hypothesis is that the life orb is the better item than the choice item. Sash is also a decent item, and maybe that's why it's about the same likelihood here they wrote as like getting like a band. Um, yeah, but I would say like life orb is kind of just better than these other items in general, especially in the Dynamax format. Again, because the Dynamax takes advantage of the orb, and Dynamax like you won't you don't want to take advantage of a sash if you're in Dynamax form because the whole point of Dynamax is you get double the HP so you can actually tank more hits. So obviously like the sash isn't really a good Dynamax item. Same thing with the choice items, but the life orb and like even leftovers isn't that good. But like in fact leftovers is, I mean, life orb it probably is the best, maybe the best Dynamax item you can possibly have on a Mon. And then for the moves, you would have these. It'll always have the knock off, so that doesn't give you any information whatsoever about the set if you see justified or knock off, because it'll always be those. Let's see. So what I can do is just start writing this Mon out. So let's see, I can just put like, so what's the most likely one? Maybe I'll just put Life Orb first because it is the most likely thing that you will see. So I'll just write 67% Life Orb and then 18%. In fact, I don't even know if I want to write like the percentage for the sash as like 14% because that actually doesn't really make any sense to me because it'll either never be sash, like if it's not the lead it'll just never be sash, and if it is the lead I think the actual chance of it being sash it's way higher than that 13%. It's like 50%. So exactly how do I want to do that? And that's the other thing about having the BST information here that's useful is because I'm pretty certain it can only have a sash if it's a certain, like if it's below a certain BST, which kind of makes sense to me because Absol probably is like that. I think it only has like mid attack stats and like mid speed, and then probably its defense. Its defenses, it seems like always like really frail, so I think its defenses aren't even that good. Probably its defense is lower than its special defense, and maybe its HP isn't even that good either because again it just goes down pretty easily. So yeah, I would speculate that this is a lower BST mon, and that is why it has the sash. Whereas Abomasnow, I think I've seen it, like I think it can even like tank like a mystical fire from Indeedee if it's not life orb, or if it's a roll. I think it might even be like a life orb, and that's not even the vested set from what I recall. So yeah, probably just a much higher BST on that Abomasnow there, which is why it won't ever have the sash on it. It can't have any possibility of generating a sash. And you saw that before in the code where it doesn't ever have sash, it's always the vest or the clay. So with the Absol, we have the Life Orb, the Band, and then I don't know what I want to write for Sash. Do I just write Focus Sash maybe? So I guess I can do that. In fact, these sets are so similar, like the Sash and the Life Orb set are essentially identical. Maybe I want to try to remember that by, because they should be like identical, right? Whereas the Band just won't have Swords Dance. So like in that case, do I just want to write this first, just so I have, it doesn't look as weird, so the percentages are like, yeah, just right next to each other. And then, so we have the focus sash. So obviously we'll look at the moves and see we have knockoff, swords, dance, sucker, combat, play rough. So without SD, it has 1, 2, 3, 4 possible moves. So I think I would just have to write each one of those. So it'll always have the knockoff. So I'm thinking if there's like a better order to do these in. But there isn't really any move that it can have that'll give you any enlightenment to the set. It's just going to be the damage that your mon takes, sort of, and noticing if it's like sash or band. Obviously, you just look after it goes for one attack, then you just look in the damage calc to see, and then that's how you know after they hit you if it was sash or band. Yeah, that's. Otherwise, there isn't really any indicator in terms of thinking about the moves that it has in the set, which is why it doesn't really matter what order I write these in. I can just write the knock off and swords. I think I'm just like lowercasing everything. Let's just keep it consistent. Swords dance will be 81. In fact, I can just copy paste, which is the nice thing. 81% swords dance. 79% sucker. It's actually really fun doing this too because you actually really get to understand the thought process and the logic and the intelligence behind how every set was created. Because these sets actually do make a lot of sense just in terms of like the coverage that they give them on, and then and like just everything, like how the moves like work with the mon in every way. So then you have 70% close combat, and then 69%, 69% play rough. So that was everything there. So that makes perfect sense, I think, right? Then you can even just double check. Knockoff, SD, 81, Sucker, 79, CC, 70, Play Rough, 69. And then I think I would just even copy paste that. Do I want to just copy paste like that? Or do I want to... Because like when I'm reading it, what will be faster when I'm reading it? Do I just want to do like this, where I'm Control C? like 67% like or focus. I don't know. I feel like I'll miss this item if I do it that way. So maybe I'll just keep it like this at least for now until I think about it more or actually field test it. So then the banded set will in fact always be the knock off, sucker punch, close combat, and play rough. Do I need to leave a period at the end? I don't think that'll really help in any way. Um, so yeah, I think that was actually pretty easy. We actually knocked that one out pretty fast. Let's see. What's easier to see? I'll just maybe leave no space there in between that. Okay, I think I like the formatting now for everything. Maybe I'll just do like one more mon. And this is where it gets pretty frickin' complicated.